today. Thanks for joining us today. We are doing our webinar today on financially fit kids and how, as parents, you can equip them for financial success. And we're going to start this here in another minute or two. We've got some more people coming in, so we're going to join you and start in about 2 minutes. Thanks for joining us today. We at 12 Points are really committed to financial education, and today's webinar is Raising Financially Fit Kids and how, as parents, you can equip your children for financial success. Before we do that, I'm Deb Cardiser. I'm a wealth advisor here at 12 Points, and my practice is devoted to helping women to master complicated finances and to develop much more confidence and safety in their finances.
Hello, I'm Tracy Harford. I am also a wealth advisor here at 12 Points, and I get to work with families and individuals on getting more clarity and confidence in all things financial in their life, which I love to do. Okay,
great. So at the end of this, you'll have our email addresses and contact information, and feel free to shoot us an email and ask specific questions. But in the meantime, for our webinar, feel free to type questions in the chat and we'll get to those as we go along. And if not, we'll try to cover those at the end. So thanks for participating today, and we'll switch to our slide deck here. And today's topics are a little bit about financial literacy today and how things look from a financial literacy landscape of the country and where adults fall. We're going to talk about parent preparation and readiness and how you can help yourselves along the way, your money values and what that means to your kids, teaching kids to understand what is money and then how it's going to impact them, going through things like what do things cost and how they can evaluate purchases and choices, what are things worth, and then we're going to go over throughout the presentation some key money skills and how to teach these to your kids, and then we'll get to the questions at the end. So in terms of financial capability, there's a survey that's run in the US every 3 years, and it goes over financial questions and it evaluates people's literacy based on how many of those questions they get right. And what we're seeing is financial literacy rates are declining. This is from 2018. They ran the survey in 2021, but I didn't have those comparative numbers for that. But what we do find is that 65% of women and 54% of men indicate that thinking about finances makes them anxious. There are numbers that talk about stress, but just the fact that this many people, more than half, feel that finances makes them anxious, just talking about it is kind of alarming. And then for the younger set, they're reporting the highest level of financial stress. 57% of 21 to 34-year-olds feel that they are stressed about money. It declines as people age, and those are the people who are typically earning the least amount, so they're bound to feel the most stress, but what can we do education-wise to help with that? And I found these next two really alarming because I do have a teenager and one in his young 20s, but more than 30% of teens don't believe they're going to be financially independent from their parents by age 30. And that, as a parent, scares the daylights out of me. So I'm really hoping they're not in that boat. And then 4 out of 10 teens fear they're not going to be able to afford to live on their own. And, similar to above, yikes, that means they're in our basements, and I don't want that. 75% of parents think it's their, duty to provide for their kids an education, but 36% don't have any clarity on how to do it. So that's why we're here today. And if there's one thing that we can really stress, it's financial readiness for parents and taking care of your financial picture, your landscape, your plan, making sure that you have a plan. How much are you saving? How much are you going to need in retirement? And no matter how young you are, starting to think about this is really critical, and it's going to help alleviate some of that stress. And working with your team of professionals. If you have someone who prepares your taxes, you can ask questions of them and get help from them. There's resources at places like Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, and custodians who offer services for free often. And check out your bank because they often have resources for you, but you're looking for forecasting and people who can help you set up a plan for yourselves. And, I think we downplay how much our attitude about money is translated to our kids. They hear it, they pick up on it, and they're sponges no matter how young they are. So if there's stress in your house over paying bills and stressed about having enough and those kinds of things, they're definitely picking up on that, and money equals stress to them. So helping yourself become more confident about your finances is going to translate to helping them. So an important piece of all this, especially when your kids are little, is talking about your values and what you want to impart to your children. If your kids are older, that ship may have sailed, but you can spend some time and bring that back into the equation. But work with your partner about what values you want to impart to your kids, and what kinds of things you want to stress about how you spend your money, and then allowing them the freedom to make those decisions for themselves as they get older. So teaching them things like experiences, valuing experiences over consumerism and materialism, and talking about how much you want to provide to your kids. You may set out early and decide what you're going to do for them, and then they become who they are, and that may change. But setting some guidelines and boundaries as a couple or as a parenting team to do that is important. And then what financial responsibilities do you want to give them and when? Kids are different, and you may have, several kids in the same family, and they can handle different responsibilities at different ages. So you take that into account as you go along. And then for human capital, what do you value and why? What's your legacy that you want to impart to them and to the world? What family history is important to you? These are all the things that can be brought into this conversation as you go along. What are your passion and your values? And then letting them get to determine what's important for them. And then social capital is social networks and community and the goodwill you build among friends and neighbors and who you support, and then who in turn can support you, teaching them the value of that. How it works in your community is important. And then obviously financial capital, that's all about money, how it works, fluency and understanding all of that and how that works. So that's what we're going to talk about here today.
So first, let's start with understanding what is money and what age kids, what do they understand at each age and part of their life. So as young as preschoolers can understand size and scope. So really they begin to understand the concept of money. By age 4, most kids can understand that money is actually an exchange for goods or services. They start to see that exchange of money. And then they start to understand the value of coins and bills and their value around age 5 to 6. Around the age of 7, you start to see that kids understand now the value of money, meaning this versus that, what each thing is going to cost and what the value might be there. And then around the age of 8 to 10, they start to see the value of saving. And that's when you see kids start to save more for some plans or ideas that they hope to do with the money that they're gaining. And then preteens and teens, they really start to understand the basics of budgeting. So really kind of helping themselves budget for a prom or for an event or for an outing with friends, and starting to budget their money in a way that they can maybe buy a car. So those start to become more real for them around their preteen, teen years. Some activities that you can do in your own household to help everyone understand money. There's some for different age groups. So I think continuing that explanation, especially at a young age for the young kids, about the money is for exchanging for goods or services. And they start to see that in your everyday interactions, when you're at the grocery store, or when you're at Target, or when you're at the Dunkin' Donuts and buying a coffee and you're exchanging those funds to get something. They start to understand that at a young age. So showing that to them is a great activity for them to understand that. Teaching them about physical and virtual money. I don't know about anybody else, but Monopoly's been my favorite for a long time. My family will laugh at me about that, but also it's a great game for kids to learn the concept of buying things. Obviously buying property, it's a really make-believe part, but I think that interaction, exchange of funds and money starts to put that reality together, and there's many more other games that you can play. We also will talk about some resources we have, but there's a lot of great money themed books that are a great way to talk to kids about how to save money, how to do chores to earn additional money, how to help and give money. And so we'll share a lot of those resources at the end of this webinar with those that are interested. Another activity is playing store. I mean, they have these set up in many children's museums as well, where kids can actually go through and purchase items and they pay for that on the way out. We've done this same game, that and playing restaurant in our own home, where our daughter will set up a menu for us to order from, and then she puts together a bill for us, and then we pay her in cash for those goods and services that we received. It's just a great way for them to understand the concepts that we live day in and day out, but in a safe place at home. Another great activity, especially for your older kids, is helping them create a budget for an important event coming up, maybe a prom or a trip with friends, or even saving for a car, and helping them put that budget together and talking about that budget so they can see the rewards of that at the end of the day. And then more importantly, discuss savings goals that you have and also their savings goals. So having those discussions together will help them see your thought process and how you might put together a savings plan for some of the goals you have in mind. And again, discussing money worries. I mean, we saw the statistics at the beginning. It's really, I mean, we have a much more anxious society, I think, today than we have ever before. Finding ways to reduce that anxiety, I think talking together as a family about money and how you can set all of your family members up for success in that, and having more of that confidence about money is really a key critical skill to learn. And then what do things cost? So obviously younger kids can start to grasp that concept about the cost of different things, especially when you start, and it's more candy related, I think, to kids. When you give them $1 or a couple quarters, they have a hard time understanding that. But I think as you let them interact with that money, letting them pay for some of those goods will help them understand the value of what quarters and dollars kind of show the difference of. Let them know what you're spending money, why you're spending money on things and why you're not spending money on things. I think a great example is even just going through the grocery store and talking about maybe prices. I mean, we've seen those prices go up consistently in the grocery store. So talking about why you might buy one brand over the other one week, and talk about the difference in prices. And I think that's a great way for kids to understand that it's not just kids that have to understand that. We all have to do that day in and day out. It's part of our lives. And then I think kids who have a better understanding of how costs are put together and how you can make those decisions, they're much more better equipped to handle those expenses on their own when they're older, because they'll start to replicate the things that you've done throughout their life. Talk about the budgeting tools that you use, how you budget, and the tools you have in our household. Our daughter sees me at the counter once a month, and we're putting together our budget for the month, but also using different tools to reconcile our checking account and making sure that we have funds where we need them to be. So I think it's important for them to see that process, and that's part of your daily routine in a household. And then as the kids get older, explain how those credit cards work. And we'll talk a little bit more further in the presentation, but you want to have those conversations, especially for these teenagers, before they enter a college campus or before they turn 18. I think many of us didn't know anything, I think, until we got to that point, and credit cards just seemed like a miracle for everything. And I think explaining to them that early and sooner is really going to help them make better decisions about the debt that they take on when it's out of your control. So really having those conversations early about compounding interest and minimum balances and how long it takes to pay off stuff is really going to go a long way for your teenagers. Activities to understand cost and value. So again, we talked about some of the grocery shopping. Show them how you comparison shop. So really, instead of thinking in your head, which many of us do, think out loud for them. Let them hear you debate why you're going to get one thing or why you're not going to buy something that week. Really kind of show that planning process out loud. And then for older kids, maybe have them add up what you're putting in the cart so they can start to keep track of the cost of what you have in your cart. And then even letting the kids pay the cashier so they can see the actual exchange of goods and did that line up with what they had on their calculator. For older kids, having them put together a plan or a budget for a family outing or a trip, and then giving them the cash for the start of that event and seeing how they do. But don't bail them out. Let them fail, because this is a safe opportunity for them to fail in an activity but still learn from that. So let them kind of do a budget from start to finish for maybe a small daily event that you guys are going to do, maybe a trip to Canopy that weekend, and you want to put in the admission costs and you want to put in what you might spend for food, and have that one kid manage that budget for the day. It's a great learning tool there. And then allowance. We'll talk a little bit about allowance, but those can be great learning tools for kids, and I think that's a great way to look at it. And you could even change that to a quarterly or an annual allowance to have them track their goals that they have and what they might use that money for. And again, letting them fail in a safe area where if they don't succeed, then you can learn from that lesson. But it's a great opportunity to use the allowance as a tool to teach your children.
So I think the important piece of this is what Tracy said earlier, and it's letting kids hear what you're thinking and the way you evaluate things. And that's an important component of this, and explaining the difference between cost and value. This is an easy one with inflation as rampant as it is. You know, costs of things have gone way up. So letting them hear you say, you know, it's not worth it to me to pay $100 for that. You know, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, it was $80, and that was okay with me, but 100 isn't. You know, those kinds of conversations. I'm not buying that for that price, kind of thing. And maybe we can find it for less money, and teaching them that as well. And then need versus want. Little kids can understand this question. You know, food is a need, but and they've got to have that. But the want is going out to dinner to fancy restaurants. We're not going to do that. It's a want. We don't have to do that. We shop at Target for the things that we need, but we don't buy toys every time because the toy is a want. The food that we're buying there is a need. They definitely get that. And saying no and delaying gratification. First of all, if you say no to your child, sticking to it makes it much more impactful. But also show them how you delay gratification, things that you're thinking about and wanting to purchase, but you know, either maybe it's not in the budget, or you're going to think about it and go home and evaluate whether or not you really want it and whether the family or you are going to use it, those kinds of things. So let them hear you talk that way and show them how you do that. And you know, clothing, things like that, toys that are no longer appropriate for them or right for them, give them away, help them participate in that and learn about charity, and understanding that these things still have value. So we're not going to put them in the trash. Other people can use them and we're helping them. So let them become a part of that. Pack up their own toys, pack up their own clothes that don't fit, things like that. Activities to understand value. They're starting to understand trade-offs at a really young age. They can understand that time trade-offs. They can't do two things at the same time. They can't go to the movie and the birthday party, and which would they rather do, which is more important to them. So helping them to go through those exercises and talking about that for things beyond money. And most of us are bargain shopping and price shopping. Show them how you're doing it. Show them what you look for. Show them how you look online to find better prices, or you find the place that you're going to go to get a good or a service by looking online first. So teach them how that works. And then opportunity cost. You know, we talked about that a minute ago. What are they giving up to get for something else? So this is how savings works. This is, we're going to put the money aside, we're not going to spend it now, and in turn we're getting a much bigger pot at the end of this. So they can understand these trade-offs by about age 4. 4 seems to be a critical age for all of these things. Use this or that language and don't limit it to money. Have them help with a vacation choice. If the family gets a vote, let them be involved in the decision. We can either do 1, 2, or 3 option and let them pick and help evaluate why we're going to pick choice number 2 and what it means to give up the other things. And let them hear you say, I don't need that, or I'm not going to buy that right now. And say those things out loud. Let them hear you have a conversation with your partner about what your priorities are in terms of spending and why you're going to delay gratification on one thing to get something else that's more important and you need more. Those are important conversations.
So we learned over time that earning is actually a great learning tool for kids of all ages. So I know that allowance can be good or bad depending on how you look at it, but we see it as a great training tool and really nothing more. It's really a tool to help them learn how to handle money, and the more responsibility they get, the bigger that allowance may be. It gives them that opportunity to start to manage money on their own in a safe space, again, with an opportunity to fail without a lot of damage to them. For kids, and we do this in our household, where you require them to save a certain percentage, either to save, to give, to spend. In our household, we focus on the saving and the spending, not that the giving is not important, but that's a different piece of our family and what we do on a separate item. But for her allowance or money that she gets for gifts or things that come in earnings wise, we talk about saving half of it, and that goes into a savings account for her that we share with her and keep track of. And then the other she can spend as she chooses. So when there's something that we're not going to buy for her at the Target, whether it's a toy or a dress or something that she wants, or makeup right now, which is the big part for my preteen, it really has to come out of her pocket. And you'll start to see that they start to make really good choices when the money comes out of their pocket, where they start to decide, well, I'm not going to spend all my $20 here. I'm only going to spend $5 because then I get some money left over. So giving them that opportunity to learn and make those decisions and have you there as support for them is really critical. And showing them how to earn more. So pay them for anything you would hire someone outside of your home to do. So don't think of it as paying them for chores, because that's really what's expected of them, but really start to pay them for things that you would hire somebody else to do. Maybe it's rake leaves that day, or maybe it's clean the swimming pool, or maybe it's something else in the household that you would hope to hire somebody for. Put that on a fridge with a list of what you're willing to pay for that, and hopefully they'll choose to do that to earn some more money. And then again, with your older children, learning to budget and forecast by switching allowances to quarterly or even annually is really going to start to make them think long-term versus short-term and immediate gratification, really looking long-term at how can they make this money work for them, whether it's lunch money that you give them for each semester or each quarter, depending on how your school system is set up, and giving them that money to learn from. Those are just great learning opportunities for your kids. Talking about just more things that you could do. We talked about the chores, the list of chores that you would be willing to pay for in your household, but also for your older kids, let them negotiate those rates. You can start the conversation at a rate, but maybe negotiate that with them and let them decide what they think that's worth, and you can kind of get to a rate that is agreeable to you both. Starting a checking account with a debit card. This is big for my 12-year-old. I'm sure it's big for others where she wants to have that card. And so I think there's many opportunities out there. I've heard of Greenlight. I've looked at that. Some of them just seem expensive, so I'm not big on spending additional money. But looking at your own bank that you work with, is there an opportunity to maybe do a checking account with your kid with you on it, and giving them that little ability to manage some of their money in that way? Because it starts to get them used to how to use that card responsibly. And not necessarily building credit until you get older, but it starts to get them in that mode of really thinking about being smart about the money that they pay and the things that they pay for. Also, like Deb had mentioned, teaching comparison shopping for fees and rates. So when you're out looking, they're looking for something particular, start to show them how you would do that research online or in stores, and knowing, hey, I saw a better rate here instead of there. Let's try to look at that and get you and save you some money on that item purchase. And I agree, involving them in family decisions and vacation choices. I don't know if I'd involve them in car buying, although the seating in the second row is important, but maybe car buying.
I think it's seeing the process.
Yeah, seeing the process.
Yeah.
But I think vacation choice is great. I have a great thing that we do with our family members. We're obviously a family of 3. So we always love to bring someone else along so that my daughter has a buddy to hang out with. And with our nieces and nephews, we wanted to get them in the mindset of saving. And so we told them each, if they could save $1,000, which seems a lot, but it's a 7-day long vacation, they get to pick where we're going as a family unit going on vacation. And then once they save $500, we pay for we buy all of our flights. And by the time we leave for that trip, they need to save the other 500, and then everything else after that is paid for them. So my last two nieces and nephews chose Aruba, so that's where we went with them for 7 to 8 days. And they had a blast. It was a great way for them to show that saving money can get them to a vacation spot that they really wanted to go to. And they still all think about that trip and want to go back and do the same thing. So just make it creative, whatever works for your family. But there's different ways to get them motivated to save that money. And I think that's the key part, is getting them into that mode. And then again, suspend judgment. We're not all going to pick the things that our kids want to buy or do with their money, but I think giving them the parameters and showing them how you think about those purchases, but ultimately let them make that decision with their money. Let them live with that decision, because you can ask them a month later, how do you feel about that purchase now, where you don't own any of that, but talk to them about it.
When I was a kid, I saved my first allowance money for a stuffed animal, and I was so pleased. It made me feel so great, and I was on top of the world. So I thought, well, I'll replicate this experience. So I saved again. I bought another stuffed animal. I came home and my dad said, what did you buy that for? And I thought, oh my gosh, we may as well throw this thing in the trash. So your words have a lot of weight, and know that. So if there's one thing that you can teach your kid, it's the ritual of saving. Teach them to save. Teach them, like Tracy said earlier, to take a consistent amount and put it away. And for little kids, make this an art project. Make, spend, save, give piggy banks. You can buy them online. You could make an art project out of them using containers and all kinds of art supplies. Some kids would love that, but make a ritual out of it. And when kids are little, use cash, because then they can see it. They can see it building. And for the give component of it, take them to their charity, whether it's the, animal shelter or whatever they've chosen, and bring the money there so they can get the gratification of being thanked and getting the impact of what they're doing. So that's an important piece of that. And maybe it's just spend and save, that's okay too. But making this a part of your family ritual is important. Setting short and long-term goals, teaching them how to save for something. The little kids need help with that. Remember, you don't want to buy that toy at Target because we're saving for X. You decided that's what you wanted to do. So teaching them the ritual and the discipline of that. And telling them no to certain things, and no, but you can save your money and buy that yourself, kind of thing. And again, watching visualization is really important, especially for little kids, to be able to count and to be able to see the actual coins and dollar bills growing in their piggy banks. It matters. And with bigger kids, using those, the apps and things like that to be able to check their savings is important and helpful. And then sweeten the deal where you can, and deciding, do you want to reward them for saving? Maybe you match a part of it. Maybe you sweeten it with a little bit of interest. If you save X amount, I'll match it and give you 5% interest or something along those lines, so that they can really start to feel rewarded for that, and you can help them make it grow a little bit more without just giving them the money. And saving together for a project can be really worthwhile. So whether it's spending money for a family vacation or an excursion or something that they're really interested in doing, saving together for that can be really rewarding and fun as well. And when you tie it to an experience, it can be really important. And then I love these numbers. I love what it represents. Teach your kids to save. And this, we can send this out if anyone's interested in it. I think older kids can really appreciate this, but you can see that the person who starts saving at age 20 and puts away $5,000 for 10 years at 8% interest is going to end up with $1.3 million at age 65. The person who starts 15 years later saving much, much more, so the total saved is $55,000 versus $130,000, he never catches up, and or she. So I think teaching them the value of saving, teaching them, showing them the numbers and the impact of that is really important. If your kids are making summer income, put money aside in a Roth. If they have W-2 income that they're getting from somewhere, have them start a Roth, and that way they can't touch the money. It's starting to save for retirement, and it's a really important lesson to, when you earn money, you take a portion of it and you put it aside. So introducing the bank and virtual money is so important. Little kids, take them to the bank, show them what goes on there and why, have them ask questions, let someone call in advance and have someone take you around and make it fun. And showing them how to use a deposit slip, how you deposit money to the bank other than going through a drive-through or doing it virtually on your phone. Show them how that works. It's the brick and mortar piece of this, and the tangible physical part of this is an important part of the learning that they'll appreciate when they're younger. And show them how to write a check. What happens when you bounce a check? What fees are involved when you bounce a check? What does it mean when you're running out of money? And how is that going to impact you? So, and then the old-fashioned check register and addition and subtraction, showing them how that works and how you need to account no matter what app you're using for the checks that you've written and how to balance those things. And showing them how debit cards work. You know, when they're little, they think it's just sort of a magic card that buys things, and showing them how it works and how you keep track of your balance. And for younger kids, if you're opening up a bank account, sometimes they're too young for the app that goes with it, but you can show them on your phone and show them what that looks like, how they're building up, and look what happens when you're spending it. So show them how to use ATM transactions, and then really what apps you're using and why. Show them how you use your banking app. They don't need to see all of the money that's in there, but show them the components of it, what you're using, how you're checking things, and, you know, going through and checking off for checks you've written or virtual payments that you've made and things like that. Very important.
This one's a fun one. So investing for the future. I think this is a great tool, especially for your older kids, to start to understand a little bit more about the stock market. I know that when I was in high school, we had a great class where we went through investing in the stock market. And I don't remember how I did, but I remember that experience fondly, because you got to pick stocks for that month or two and to see how your funds grew or didn't grow during that time. There's so many tools now to help kids understand saving and investing. And I think getting kids to talk about what they would buy for stocks and why would be really insightful. I mean, I think I've heard some people do this game during the pandemic where they actually asked their kids, if we could buy stock, what would you buy? And one kid had said Costco because we go there all the time. Or maybe another family is Target because I shop there a lot. So it's just getting kids to think about why they would invest in a company and really getting them to understand that buying stock in a company gives you a small ownership in that company as well. So really thinking of it as investing and buying into a company. And this can be easily done. You could pick this, we put a website on here, which is the stockmarketgame.org, which a lot of schools use as well. It's one way you could do that. You could also just use your own phantom money and track it as a family, where you each pick, you have a sum of money and you can each pick a stock and see how those go up and down, and really talking that through about what that means when you're watching that stock market ticker go up or down. What does concepts like income and dividends and principal mean? I think starting to expose them to those terminologies, but also walking them through how to read a balance sheet and maybe learning that together and going online. There's so many great resources. I think the more that we can expose them to things that will be impactful during their life is really key, especially at these young, influential ages. So budgeting and borrowing, these are just different ways that you can help them do some budgeting and borrowing. So you could show them how you do your budgeting process and involve them where you can. And obviously, there's not everything you want them to see, but talking about how much you spend maybe on restaurants, or how much you are planning on family vacation time this year. Also letting them learn from their consequences. So giving them the opportunity to learn from that. So if they exceed their budget, if things don't go quite as planned, talk that through. It's okay to fail, because from there we can learn and grow from that. And especially for younger kids, practice. I mean, you could use the library as a great example, because everything you borrow from the library, you have to return. And so the same idea comes with if you're taking on any debt, anything that you borrow, you're going to have to pay back. So really teaching them how that equates to the money world and what that means for them. And then also for these older kids, you could also let them borrow small amounts from you so that you could kind of show them the importance of paying you back. And you could walk them through that payback schedule as well. And then for the older kids, they can start to get these lump sums to start to budget it. We talked about it's a great tool, maybe a quarterly budget or allowance, however you want to call it, for lunch money, and letting them see, okay, at the end of that quarter, how did they do? And so these are great opportunities to teach them in a variety of ways how to be mindful and responsible with their money. Oops. There we go. Living with financial consequences. So again, that learning from failure is really important. So this is a safe spot for them, with you guiding them in that process to allow them to fail where it has really less impact. And learning to control and recognize what they want versus what they need, and really talking that through. And trying not to bail them out and supplement these purchases. Really hold the line on that. It's the same thing as when you say no, mean no, because then they start to know that maybe they can convince you to do something extra for them. So really holding out on that and letting them deal with the ramifications of spending too much money. And allow them some freedom with the money they do earn, so they can feel the impact of those decisions. So really giving them the money in their wallet to say, if you want to buy that, that's fine. I'm not giving you any additional money. And they start to make better choices when they know that that's their money. And teaching them about the opportunity for long range planning. That's really important, to kind of plan a goal maybe 6 months out and say, okay, let's try to plan for something you really want. Is it a bike? Is it a trip to this store to do this? Start to plan that out and work with them on a savings goal, because it gets exciting for them. I know that my nieces and nephew, when they were saving for that trip, it was a weekly conversation at my dad's house to talk about where they were and how excited they were about it, because they could actually save that money. My niece was terrible at saving money, and she has become a much better saver since that time, because she wants to go on more trips on her own with her friends. So I think it just teaches them that the success and opportunity to get to that end goal. And if you do bail them out, insist that they pay you back. So you don't want to be the excuse for them to be able to get out every time, because when they get older, you may not always be there to help them get out of the situation. So really work with them on building a game plan that gets them out of owing you or going over budgeting expenses. And then share stories of your successes and failures. I think that's really important to be mindful that they learn from what we're doing in our own lives, and good or bad. I think these are great stories to share with them, and they can be little ones, but talk about, oh, I jumped the gun on buying that and now the price went down, or I should have waited because it's not really what I wanted. I think talking about those things out loud will really help kids do the same on their end, because they really love to mimic what their parents do.
So understanding credit is such an important component of this also, and keeping them out of trouble, showing them how to stay out of trouble is important. So teach them to pull a credit report annually and look for fraud. Make sure, and I've seen it on little kids' Social Security numbers where they have debt on there that they didn't accrue. So you should look at it as a parent, but teach them how to do it. And then what makes up a FICO score and who uses it. So if you don't know what makes up the score, Google it and teach them, but who uses it? Right now, it's anything from obviously the loans that they're going to take out to employers. Future employers often pull a FICO score these days to make sure that you're not in financial trouble. And teach them, most importantly, to always repay in full. If you can't pay for it, don't buy it. And that's such an important lesson. Teach them that in your world, there's limits to what we can all afford and pay for. So teach them that there are limits, and the credit card isn't a way to just get everything that you want. If you bail them out, make them pay you back. And the important piece of this is not raising kids who have their hand out all the time. If you keep bailing them out and you don't make them pay you back, and you don't have lines in the sand that they can't cross, they will end up with the kids who grow up as adults with their hand out all the time. And then teaching them that all debt is not the same. $100,000 mortgage versus $100,000 of credit card debt are not even close to the same based on the amount of interest that they pay. And the mortgage can help you out, can help your credit, can be tax deductible, all those things. And with the credit card, you're paying astronomical rates, obviously, and there is no tax break on any of those things. So teaching them the difference of debt and what works and can help you and what doesn't is critical. And then there are charts online that you can look up and showing them how long it takes to pay off $10,000 worth of debt with just minimum purchases. And you can show them the debt starting to accrue interest as well. So debt building on debt, and how that can snowball and take them offline. And the message here is debt. All debt is not good. And then teaching them how to shop for rates and the terms of the agreement and the loans. Look at NerdWallet. It's a great website that can help you select credit cards, see which new cards are the best, and cards for different purposes. It's a really helpful consumer website that kids should know about. And then establishing credit for them is really important, using planned expenses like gas and things that they're going to have to do regularly, and then making a ritual out of paying it off. Checking over the bill, how do you do that? Look for mistakes, look for issues, and then pay it off the first of every month or whatever date you choose, but make a ritual out of paying it off. And then college tuition and debt. This is so important, and I would love to have people think differently about college and about the debt that gets accrued either to you or to them, and to really think about this from a perspective of a few steps back from where we typically think about it. And typically we think about, well, this is the amount of money we have, and this is where my kid has chosen to go to school, and this is how much debt's going to be involved. And I'd love to see people take a step back and do it a little bit differently. First of all, they don't offer loans for retirement. They do offer loans for college. So take care of yourself and your retirement savings first. Make sure that your first bucket is for your retirement savings. If there's some left over, put it towards college savings, but your retirement money should always come first. And talk about with them what you have saved or what you intend to save for them and how much you're willing to contribute, so they have a sense of that, and have that conversation before they start looking for schools so they know how much they have to put towards tuition, because it's going to change the search game with them, and it involves them in the process instead of casting you as the bad guy at the end who has to say, you know what, we shouldn't pick that school because of this. So help them and guide them through the process with you. And then using the financial criteria, I always say, is let money have a seat at the table when you're deciding where to go. And so it's, this has the best program, or that has a great location, or this is where my friends are going. Put a seat at the table and label it money and let it have a vote, because it's really important. And if you start before the process, it'll make it much easier to end up at the right school. And then help them to, as they're choosing a major and deciding where to go and figuring out if they're going to have to take on debt to graduate, look at the starting salaries for careers that they're contemplating. And maybe they have no idea, but start the process to show them, this is the starting salary for a career like this, and here's the starting salary for a different career. You like both of them equally, what would you like to do? And then how much of that starting salary is going to have to go to the debt that they're going to be accruing. So involve those things as part of this process, both the end result as career and the beginning result, which is the debt to accrue. And then the piece of advice that I got that was so helpful to me going through this is, if your child gets merit money, go back and ask for more. They can always say no. They're not going to rescind their admission to your child, but we got more money. We got, I think, $5,000 more per year, which over 4 years adds up. So that was really helpful. And the other thing that we've done with our son is I showed him what we put aside in the 529. And if you're not familiar with the 529, it's a way to save money tax-free. So, and you can watch some of our other webinars about 529s, but what I did with my son, my husband and I sat him down and we showed him what he had in the savings account, and then we have him make the payments to the college. So he gets a real sense of how much he's paying, how much he got in merit money, and you know, the net bill. So I think it's made his grades a little bit better, but I'm not entirely sure. But he's got skin in the game, and he knows that what he's paying for it and what those services are worth. And I think it's helped him to value his college experience a little differently.
I think one part, I think that's really important, is making sure you know too that we obviously can borrow for education, but you can't borrow for your retirement. And too often we hear a lot of people wanting to support their kids' financial education piece. And I know that's really important, but also realize too, you don't want your kids to support you later in life either. So really understand the needs and the wants, and that you need to be able to retire in the way that you want to be able to have the funds there for you. So really making sure you go through this process so that you understand what you can reasonably give to their education versus taking it from your retirement.
Yeah, as much as we don't want them living in our basement, we don't want to be living in theirs either. So
The giving back, I think, is for our family, it's really important. And I think that's to get the kids involved with those activities as young as possible, I think is really important. Establishing that give bucket, I love that. We haven't done that in our family. We do it in another way, as I mentioned, but I think that's another great way to be able to do that. For our family, we actually, I think since even before I had a child, I did this with my nieces and nephews, is that we would adopt a family or adopt kids their same age every holiday season. And I would have them go out and actually shop with me for these items, so they could pick things that they would love, but they would actually have to give to somebody else. And I think that was a great way for them to understand the giving piece, because many times it was a conversation in the store about, I want this, but it's like, well, you can't have this. We have to give this to someone else that needs this or that won't have something under the tree for them. So I think establishing that giving need, that I think is really important for kids to know to give back. And I think also the volunteering as a family is really important, because it gets them to see why that's important across the board when they see people of all, like living, people that have come from different sides of the world where not everyone is equal. So understanding that people are in different boats and that we rise and fall a little bit differently. So getting kids to see that and be a part of that solution. And so Toys for Tots, the food banks, serving, I mean, getting involved. My daughter was in Girl Scouts, so they did a lot with the food banks, which I think was really important, because she thinks about that more so now, where she sees people and wants to help and give to them. And even her own money, where she sees someone on the streets, she does want to give them money because she feels that and has seen the impact of some of those decisions. And I think making a giving process for you, every family's different. You do what you can. I mean, growing up, my parents did what they could, and maybe it was an angel off of the holiday tree on our church or something along those lines, but every family can do something. It's donating the clothes that your kids have outgrown. I think that's another great way to help your kids give away toys maybe that they no longer need anymore and that someone else could make use of. So I think there's different ways to teach your kids to give back, and it can be done as a family. I think that makes it more exciting, is when everyone in the family is part of that process. Maybe it's a big donation day where you start to all go through your closets and your toys and things that you have that you don't need anymore, and you give them away as a family. I think that really makes it much more impactful. So some key takeaways. I know we're close to the end of the hour here, but some things that we want to make sure that you leave with. So be an active financial educator for your kids. I think there's so much information out there today, books, resources online, and really helping them see the different options that they have to educate. There's a number of resources, and we'll share a bunch. We'll give you this resource guide that we have that is helpful for whether you have little kids or older kids, that we will share with everybody, because there's some great resources in there for you to look at. But keeping a regular conversation with your kids about money and be a positive role model about that. I know things won't always go great in all of our financial lives, but really being open with our kids about that and having that conversation early. Don't wait until they're out of the house to have those conversations about money, because they don't learn it in school necessarily. They're starting to put those initiatives in place, but we really need to take the lead on making sure our kids understand what money is and how we can help them maintain that going forward. And then praise them for any initiatives that they've done, like not just earn money, but goals that they've met or things that they've done with the earnings that they have. I think that encouraging them and praising them is really going to go a long way. And then reserve judgment on their spending. As much as we want to comment, and maybe it's not the teddy bear I would have bought something else with my money, but I think reserving judgment and let them maybe even ask questions about why they chose something and what does it mean to them. And that can start to get you to understand their perspective. And then include them where you can in your own financial world. I think there's some conversations that we obviously don't want our kids to be involved with, but there's other ways that they can be a part of those conversations and really glean a lot of great information, because the way that you are today is very likely the same way that they will replicate that conversation in their period of life at that same time. So be mindful of that.
So I grew up in a family where it was impolite to talk about money, and ironic that I have this as a career, but there was so much that I didn't learn because my parents didn't, there was no conversation around it. It was sort of not discussed. And so the more you can discuss these things with your kids and bring them into your thought process and how you do things, they may end up doing things differently, but really, really important. And there are a couple of questions that have come up along the way, one of which was about the recording. The recording will be on our website by Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest, but you can find this on our website and click on it and play it back. And we will email the resources that Tracy mentioned out to everybody. There's all kinds of things around conversations and activities and books for your teenager, and then books to read your little kids. To show them different pieces of what we've talked about today. And then somebody commented on that I thought was very helpful is teaching people to your kids as you go to the grocery store about the unit cost label at the grocery store as another way to compare prices and find deals, because you may not be comparing the prices of things with the same volume, but they pointed out that it's been a way for them to save a lot of money. So I thought that was a great tip. Thank you for sharing that. And then one other question that came up is, what if my kids deal with money differently? And there's some interesting books that have been written about money personalities. So you might want to go check that out. Look up kids or adults for that matter, money personalities. And you can have kids who have been brought up the same way in the same family, and they have completely different money personalities. And learning a little bit about what motivates them, what their personality type is, and all of those things can really help you tailor what you want to teach them and tailor how you deal with them around money. There's personalities like the deal getter who will shop for a sale at all costs, the magpie who's out looking for everything shiny and is constantly spending, the person who is the saver and the kind of hoarder who hoards money almost. And so understanding what's behind all that can really help you deal with them, and you may deal with your children very differently around money. So learning a little bit about that may help you with that component.
And then just one last thing, I know that someone else mentioned Green Light Card. I know that there's a number of different apps that kids can use online with their parents. And I think looking at the different options and understanding what you're willing to offer money-wise, because I know the Green Light app does cost some money. There is some education, but there's so much education available out there on the internet that I think there's a lot of resources there. I know that there's various other banks will allow kid accounts if there's an adult on that account as well. So that's another great way to get them to kind of see those saving numbers. And then I know that at Fidelity, kids can start a brokerage account as young as 13. So testing out that stock market game and doing that, you might have some kids at 13 that might have interest in doing that. So there is a lot of resources, and we'll share what we have in our document as well with everybody in this call. But if there's any other questions that you have at this time, our contact information is on this last page of the slideshow, but feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're happy to help however we can.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and have a great day.